And a pleasant evening, everybody. My name is Zach Hughes, and this is Hot Topics. And um, we are going to dive into a few things tonight. But we're going to jump into. Um, I'm going to talk with you about a disaster that is 40 years old this week, and actually NASA has a remembrance on a few different disasters in this week. But the one I want to talk about tonight, and we'll talk a little bit about Columbia too, but the disaster of Challenger, um, which I researched. So let's dive right into that. In just a second, I'm going to put let's see, sorry, there we go. I'm going to put the Hot Topic link into the chat. Um, this will, hopefully, there it goes. This will give you a chance to go over to Hot Topics, and I do have the shows over there. They're now being posted via YouTube after I transfer them. Um, so, because of video limitations on Facebook, I've had to do the YouTube transfer. So anyway, I'll be doing that, but then you'll still have a link. So if you go over to Hot Topics, you'll see that over on the Facebook side, plus other things that I post on the side. It gives me a little fan club and gives you little updates. Okay, so let's dive in. I was going to really want to talk about something a bit different. I do it every year, so those of you who have been with me for the last few years know that I will talk about this, but I'm not going to go as in depth as I did last year. But I am. Let me talk about how um, this comes to be. So, my interest in NASA uh, was when I was younger. I did get a little interested in it around fifth grade. Um, but I want to talk about. Let's talk about Challenger, though. Let's go there because Challenger is going to be. This is going to be the 40th year, and I cannot even really believe it. 40 years. Wow. So 40 years on January 28th is going to be something. And where were you during that day? Um, wow. Yeah, it's really was a moving disaster. It was a disaster that changed a lot of yeah. So let's jump into it a little bit. I will talk about it a little bit here, um, to not as in depth, but let's talk about it. So in 1984, Ronald Reagan, President Reagan at the time, put out a put out a request for NASA to choose a teacher to go into space. Um, and so, you know, a lot of folks applied for that. There were two from each state, as a matter of fact, that were seeked out, and it was whittled down to 10 folks, um, and and then on July, I want to say it was July 19th, 1985. On that date, NASA chose, or I'm sorry, Vice President Bush announced the winner. But before he did that, the winner actually knew um, that they were going in and that they were going to be chosen. Um, and the way they knew that was that that they had insisted on wanting to know the winner, and they ended up getting to know. And the way I understand it happened is that Krista was told, Krista McAuliffe was told that she'd better prepare because she was going to be the one or whatever it was, and then Vice President Bush selected or announced it, and he says in the video, it's so interesting to watch this, he doesn't realize that Krista's there or something. He says, "Is that you?" to her, and but they choose her. And so what was the so Chris McAuliffe and then Barbara Morgan as an alternate in the event that Krista couldn't go. Chris McAuliffe was a high school teacher from Concord, New Hampshire, and so the plan was to have her train in the fall of 1985 at Johnson Space Center. And that's exactly what happened. She was assigned to Mission 51L, which was scheduled to launch in January of 1986. So let's just get down to the let's take a break for a minute. I want to head over to January 28th. I want to talk about that day, what that was like, and then I can go back to the particulars of Challenger and prior some lessons learned. So January 28th of 1986, I was in a classroom at the Hewin Center in Port Arthur, Texas. And let me just make sure I'm still going here. Yep, I'm good. Okay, sorry. Sometimes it does some weird stuff on here. But anyway, yeah, so I was in a classroom at the Hewin Center, and I don't remember much about the event other than that the room suddenly was excited at 1 minute and at one moment, and then it was very. I still remember it was kind of quiet, weird quiet is what I kind of characterize it as, and later I kind of found out what happened, and I told my dorm mate who came back from the hospital. I said, the spaceship blew up. People tried to explain it to me. I didn't really know much about that sort of thing. I was still young. Then, a few years later, I started to get interested in space shuttle, and in 5th grade, I think it was. And I really grew an interest in the space shuttle and the space shuttle program in general. And I started to research Challenger. That was, the beginning of my research of Challenger. Although I put Challenger on the, on hold, and I researched Titanic. But then I went back and researched Challenger again, and in junior high school at this point, which would have been around 1991, which would have been around, about 5 years, almost 6 years after the disaster, because I insisted in 7th grade that we have a moment of silence on January 28th of 1992, and we did. My core class, both core classes in 7th grade at U32 did have that. We did that. And so I ended up doing that, and I ended up researching it. Um, but the disaster has continued to really follow me over the years, especially after I researched it. I was very frustrated uh, in general with it. And I think everyone who has seen the aftermath of the disaster, as far as the investigation, would have to agree with me that it's a learning experience. It's a serious learning experience, and so that's what's important to understand here, um, because when you look at it, it exposed a pressure and all that. And so, what was it supposed to be? What was that mission supposed to be on January 28th? What would have it been if it had succeeded? Well, it was supposed to be a teacher in space. Krista McAuliffe would have broadcast 2 lessons from space. And she would have also done some experiments and done some other stuff. In addition, Challenger was supposed to launch a satellite out to, research the Halley's Comet, and they were also supposed to put into orbit another satellite. So if all had gone well, they would have come back, I believe, on or around February 4th of 1986. They were scheduled to launch out of Kennedy Space Center on January 28th and return to Edwards, I believe Edwards Air Force Base, or maybe Kennedy Space Center after that. And then after that mission, Chris McAuliffe was going to be on loan to NASA for like an entire year. And she was going to go around and be available to students and to, interviews around the country. So imagine that for a moment, what could have been with that. But unfortunately, there was a weakness at NASA that just was a disaster waiting to happen. A lot of pressure, and to me, Challenger is like a case study in decision making, and so let's dive into that just for a moment, and the issue around that, and so the space shuttle. Many see it as the space shuttle launched normally, and you watch the launches and it's all cool, right? Well, the space shuttle was actually more than was still an experimental craft right up until retirement in 2011. I think it's really important for folks to understand. It still had its quirks. It had heavy risk to it. And then there's issues of pressure. There's issues of pressure and all that. And, if you look at it, the reality of 1986 was NASA was striving to put the shuttle into space more. The schedule in 1986 called for more launches than had been done. And this was due to pressure around the program. And so the reality of it is that NASA is, under a lot of pressure at this point. And so the issue of what I'm about to go into around this, one of the things that came into play was some delays that started to occur. And the first of those delays actually would be 40 years ago tomorrow, which was January 26th. And originally on January 25th um, which would have been tonight, 40 years ago. The NASA managers met, flight managers met, and there was a weather forecast for the 26, which called for rain. And so, because of the shuttle's tiles, they had to postpone it. But the other reason they needed to postpone it and they couldn't wait is wait to decide. Like, some folks be like, well, why couldn't they have waited? Because what you're going to find out is that, you know, it was a perfect weather forecast on the 26th, actually. They originally forecasted for rain, but it was a nice day. But the reason they couldn't wait is because they have to make a decision, because they are going to fuel the external fuel tank. And that, that would be a waste if they waited like that. So, no, they couldn't do that. So that was the first in a series of delays. And this put pressure. NASA also had some delays on other shuttle missions. Notably, Columbia in 1985 went through a number of delays. But here's the bottom line. So the real kicker was on January. So actually, let me stop for a second. I'm just trying to sort this for you. This is as real as you're going to get for broadcast. So I don't usually edit stuff and stuff like that. So here's what happened. So on January, I'm going to go through the sequence now. January 25th, the managers met. The crew had arrived at Kennedy Space Center on January 23rd from Houston. They spent the day on the 25th. They spent a few hours at the NASA beach house with their families. This required, family members going through quarantine, quarantine checks. But anyway, they did that, and then the crew was expecting the launch on the 26th. And the NASA managers chose to delay it. On January 26th, it dawned a beautiful day. And everyone was frustrated about that because, darn, they could have gone up. And at this point, Vice President Bush has to leave. He was supposed to, hey, Caitlin, he was supposed to view the launch, but guess what? He had to get going, and the launch wasn't happening on that Sunday. So the crew watched the Super Bowl and just hung out and did all that. And then they were supposed to try again on the 27th of January, which they did. And beautiful day on January 27th again, except, and everything was routine right up until about 9 minutes before launch. A hatch bolt would not release. They couldn't seal the orbiter. So it took like 2 or 3 hours to figure this out. And during the time they tried to fix it, they couldn't get a drill that was working, all that jazz. So by that time, winds had started to come up, and that caused the shuttle mission to be delayed yet again. And at this point, news organizations, from what I understand, were starting to joke about the delays. And the weather forecast for that night and into January 28th was going to be really cold. So here's what the crew went back to crew quarters, and they were allowed to have dinner with their family, from what I've researched. But meanwhile, the a conference was called at the behest of Morton Thiokol, who deals with the boosters of the shuttle. And the reason is because the cold weather has an effect on the boosters, notably the O-ring on the shuttle. And there was issues around the temperature because temperature was supposed to be below. It's like going to be really cold. And what ended up happening is that they had a conference, unbeknownst to the crew. Of course, the crew's in their quarters. They had a conference, a teleconference, and this is where the shit hits the fan. Excuse my language. Morton Thiokol makes a recommendation to NASA, no go. They say don't go. They want the temperature to warm up. They're concerned about temperatures having effect on the booster. They had seen some erosion on the booster from a 1985 mission. So they do that. And then suddenly NASA pushes back. NASA through a guy named Larry Malloy pushed back. And he basically said that he was appalled at the recommendation. And he asked Morton Thiokol, when do you want me to launch my shuttle? Next spring? And that's where the conference got heated up. The engineers had, of course, tried to present their case, including Roger Boisjoly, who really got heated about it because he was worried. He knew. So the next thing you know, at this point, when NASA pushes back, the engineers, the managers at Morton Thiokol are not expecting this, and they suddenly ask for time off the call, which kind of surprised NASA too. And the manager basically says to the engineers, to one of the other engineers who's kind of a manager, it's time for you to take off your engineer hat and put on your management hat. And he basically, after this, they overrode the engineers and they recommended the launch. Now, in order to make sure, Morton Thiokol had to sign off on this at the request of NASA because they are basically kind of surprised and said, we need this in writing. So one of the guys at Morton Thiokol would not sign off. He was down at the Cape, and at Cape Canaveral, and he refused to sign. So they had another guy up at Morton Thiokol in Utah sign off. And this is about 11 o'clock at night now. They sign off, and the launch is green lighted. Now, overnight, the temperatures are starting to drop, and there's icing on the pads, and the icing crew goes out and looks at the pad and all that. Now, the launch is moved a couple hours. It was supposed to be 9:38. They moved it to 11:38 Eastern. And what happened on January 28th is what happened on the rest of the days. The crew went out to the pad. They got into the launch shuttle. Sorry, and so what happened is, after that, NASA managers gave the final green light at 9 minutes, which is the final hold. And what happened was the shuttle launched, and the shuttle went through. I'm sorry, I'm just giving this some thought here. I'm going through the memory. The shuttle goes up. It goes into a roll program, and everyth's good. And here's where it's really interesting, and I do say this. The shuttle encountered some wind shear, because the way the shuttle works, I should stop for a second. The shuttle goes up. It launches, and at 2 minutes, somewhere between 2 minutes and 15 seconds, the solid rocket boosters are separated from the shuttle. And then the shuttle goes up on main engines, and they have main engines, but the boosters are separated. And then a little bit later in flight, the external fuel tank, which is that orange thing you'll see on the shuttle, separates. And then they go into orbit. Now, at any given time, the shuttle may have to return, and there are different stages of return. Now, a return has never been attempted during the shuttle program. In fact, it had always been said they weren't even sure they could do a return successfully. But returns could happen, where you could return to Kennedy Space Center through, procedure, or you could return via, like, Africa. There was a way to do that in Senegal, Dakar. And there were things like that. And so the thing is, the shuttle in this case had already done its roll program. It went through a throttle up procedure at its most maximum point of the stresses of the shuttle. It went through that. And then something went wrong. You'll notice when the shuttle's going up, if you look at a video of this, there's a flame in the right-hand side. And what's happening is the booster, the solid rocket booster, is reacting to that cold. It had already been reacting to the cold on the pad, and I'll go back to that in a second, because you're going to be absolutely shocked at what I reveal to you. I think. Most people are used to Challenger, blowing up when it launched. But instead, what happened, I'll get to that in a second. But what ended up happening here is the solid rocket booster, the O-ring failed. The O-rings failed because of the cold. And the next thing you know, it burnt through the strut, and it basically, the booster slammed into the the booster slammed into the external tank and ignited it, eventually ignited it. Now, what I want to tell you was the fear of the engineers. This is going to shock you. The fear of the engineers was that the shuttle was going to blow up on the pad. And the way that would have happened is when it ignited, when they went into launch. And in fact, it almost did. But what ended up happening is a piece of debris blocked the hole in the joint. Which it would have been fine. It may have even made it to orbit, believe it or not. Challenger may have made it to orbit, except for one thing. Challenger went through a heavy wind shear during the launch at max Q, which I just described to you, that throttle up time. And at that point, the piece of debris knocked loose out of that hole. And that's when that booster failed, when the O-ring failed. And that's just some fascinating piece of information, because I don't think many people know this. They remember the explosion happening while the shuttle was off the pad, but imagine if it had been on the pad. So we can just think about that. And I bring this up because it's just a lot of emotion. Disasters are a lot of interesting information. And there's not one, there's usually many different reasons, many different things that fall into place for a disaster to happen. When this happened, when the shuttle blew up, it of course halted the space program for 2 years. But it also President Reagan did a speech that night. I remember this speech, and he directed some of it to children. But I'm thinking they did the investigation too. They had the Rogers Commission do their investigation, and this is what they found. NASA's culture was horrible, in a sense. There was a stress. This was an accident waiting to happen, just because and it could have been prevented. And we can say would have, could have, should have, but unfortunately, we're not going to go back now. But you learn from it. You learn from these things. And they did learn. And what they did is they redesigned the boosters. They made it safer. They made it so that engineers could speak loudly if they had to. And I'm giving you the shorter version of it because you're free to research it. But I think what's interesting is it's the 40th year. And NASA, though, would have to learn lessons still. NASA, you'd think that NASA would have learned something, but they didn't. And I will talk about this next show. We'll talk about Columbia, which would happen on February 1st of 2003. Because, and again, NASA's culture would show up in, everyone talks about safety, but I want to talk about the importance to understand the shuttle and anything NASA was doing is always a risk. But when you know that something is wrong with your device, when you're told by your engineers that this is not a good idea, it's probably a good idea to follow your advice. The problem is you have a lot of pressure coming down. You had a lot of delays going on, and this didn't look good. One of the problems with delaying this, just to give you an example, is that Krista McAuliffe's lesson would have had to have been broadcast during the weekend. And this just didn't look good optically for NASA. NASA was dealing with a lot of pressure. They, the Space Shuttle, I want to say this again, Space Shuttle was an experimental craft up until its retirement. I think a lot of people said, well, it was launched like, the first few missions, and Ronald Reagan, which I did see a speech by him saying, yeah, it's all good now. Something like that. And the reality was, it was a risky thing. Every time you go up, it was risky. Every time you launched the thing, it was risky. The reality is, let's see what you said. Oh, yeah, I talked about that, Caitlin. Yeah, we're talking about that experimental yeah, but that was a lot worse. That guy didn't even, oh my God, yeah, you could get me going on that. Caitlin's talking about the craft that went down, I forget the guy's name, Stockton Rush, and he thought it was all cool, and he was shortcutting, and he decided to shortcut. And, the sad thing with that disaster was that, he was transporting passengers and risking their lives. So, absolutely, you absolutely are right. And, it was bad. I mean, it was only a matter of time. And this culture just needs to go away. This kind of bullshit culture of everything is, and NASA had some grand plans for the shuttle. But it was so bad that they had an ambitious, quote, ambitious launch schedule for 1986. And it would have seen a lot of, but there was just a lot of, things that the public just didn't see, and one of them was the pressure that happened, and it just really sucks, because can you imagine what that would have been like if it had succeeded? Right? I mean, if it had succeeded, Imagine what that would have done. And until this day, I still live with that. I researched that disaster. I lived it, in a sense. And I was just watching something last night. It talked about the psychological stuff of this disaster. And it's still out there. Where were you during this disaster? And if you were a kid, you were most likely in a classroom, and or you're an adult, you might have been at work, or you might have been at home watching it on TV. It was really supposed to get the American public energized with NASA. But there was also this issue around the shuttle. Was it carrying its weight? No pun intended. Was it doing what it's supposed to do? Or was it just, a waste? And this was supposed to re-energize it. And unlike Stockton Rush, though, the shuttle had, a lot of safety, safety to it, in a sense. It had everything you could do with safety, but the reality of it was that I'm trying to think of the word. It was an experimental craft still. You can't say, well, it's a certified shuttle, it's good to go. And it really just wasn't. And I think that's hard for people to understand. Even when I talk about Columbia next week, you'll understand this. It's the same thing. And with Stockton Rush's watercraft being underwater and trying to take people to Titanic and trying to shortcut his design, really was a faulty move. Also playing with fate, in my opinion. You play with fate and you find out. Like, I was told, I'm trying to figure out, what does FAFO mean, in text? And I figured that out. I'm not going to say it here. But, that's basically what you do when you're messing around like that. And that is why we have safer modes of transit today with NASA. And I will go into that next week. We'll talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about, a little more about the crew. Now, the crew were a mix of folks, and so we had, and let me see if I can get this right, because it's been so long. And they still kind of have their names, but there was Dick Scobie. He was the commander of the mission. Then there was Mike Smith. He was a pilot of the mission. And then there was Allison Alazuka, Judy Resnick, and let me see. Let me think for a minute. Hang on, I'll figure that out in a minute. I forgot his name. Man, I'm really looking really good. I'll come up with it. But yeah, I'll have to figure it out here. I almost messed up with that. But yeah, I'm sorry, I can't name them all. I don't have it in front of me. But my yeah, I'll figure that out in a minute. Man, I'm just doing this on the go here. That's okay. But the other ones were, I also had Gregory Jarvis. He was from Hughes, which he was on there to deploy a Hughes satellite. No relation to my name, by the way, and I am going to look up that list because I want to be fair to everybody. So I just kind of blinded. Oh, great. I smoked it. Yeah, that's great. Hang on. Hold on. Huh?
The fire alarm's going off.
Yeah,
Perhaps you see me.
just try to get the air clear there.
What do you want me to do? Open that door?
No, I want you to
Shut the door.
just play with the air a little bit. There you go. All right, close my door.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. So, anyway, I'm gonna get that done. Let me figure that out. Yeah, wow, that's the first time my shower's done that in a while. I've actually not had that problem with my shower. Interesting. Let me see. What was I trying to do here? Yeah, I want to look this up, and I'll probably shoot myself in, with a Nerf gun later. Let's see. What do we got here? We have. Let's see. I gotta look this up, so bear with me because I want to be fair. Let's see. There we go. I should be able to pull this right up. There you go. Sorry about that. So the crew was Dick Scobie, Michael Smith, Judy Resnick, Ronald McNair, Ellison Awazuka, Greg Jarvis, and Krista McAuliffe. There you go. Interesting was Greg Jarvis. He wasn't even supposed to be on that flight, but he was selected, he got a slot on that flight, but he wasn't supposed to be on that one. He had been waiting for a slot, and it so happens that Challenger was it. So, anyway, that is basically who the crew were, and we're going to have that again because I have steam from the shower. So just bear with me. We're having fun here. That's okay. Have some folks over. So a little fun with this broadcast because you never know what you're going to get. Let's see. What else? So we look at this legacy of this crew, and it was a mix of folks. I just wanted to kind of talk about them tonight because it just continues to be a really interesting situation or case. And it is what I love about it in a sense is it's a good way to look at how do you deal with decisions. One thing I can take away is Roger Beaujolais, how he handled the recommendation. He was very heated. And so I'm often wondering if maybe he had stayed calmer, if they would have, heard him. Because one of the problems with yelling and trying to get their attention and is that no one wants to listen at that point. So can you imagine what might have happened? And I'm not blaming Roger Beaujolais at all. I feel awful. And what happened with Roger Beaujolais is, awful as well. And the Morton Thiokol engineers, a couple of them, ended up really not, there was one engineer who ended up getting fired from Morton Thiokol after he gave testimony, I believe. What happened to Roger Beaujolais is he ended up, going into a very serious depression and all that. That would be expected after a disaster like this. And, what's unfortunate is, again, that meeting the night before was heated. There was a lot of pressure to it. I often think about that because I've been in heated meetings too before. But when people's lives are on the line, I think it's time to be realistic. I think we have to be absolutely realistic about that. I always joke about it. I say, well, I don't usually use a calculator unless people's lives are affected. Then I use a calculator. Okay? And that's really what we got to look at here. When you look at the dynamics of these decisions. And again, when I talk about Columbia next week, you're gonna, you're gonna find out about that because again, the same dynamic. So anyway, I wanted to kind of talk about that. We will talk about Columbia next week. I believe, yep, we'll talk about Columbia next week. May even pull a show sooner. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. But we'll talk about Columbia because that's another one. And then another anniversary on that top of that is Apollo, one of the Apollo missions. I'll have to take a look on January 27th of 1967. There was a disaster on the pad at Cape Kennedy at the time. So same as Cape Canaveral, they changed it, but it was the Kennedy Space Center, Cape Kennedy after JFK. So, my love of the space program is something that is just wonderful. And one of the things that I, kind of witnessed recently was one of the private missions went up. This person was had a disability, I believe was in a wheelchair first time, and yet no one really celebrated that I could see. But I was always, when I was younger, I was thinking about that would have been so cool. I had this love of the space program and of the shuttle program in particular. I kind of missed the shuttle program. And so let's see what you're saying here. Yeah, I know, Caitlin. Yeah, the smoke detectors was hopefully you have smoke detectors, Caitlin, jokingly. But no, the reason these went off, Caitlin, is because the people I have over, they were using the shower and the steam from there, and I actually don't have that problem with with me, so I don't know what happened there, but at least I know it works. It must be I have a magic touch or something. I don't know, but yeah, I thought they were cooking, but yeah, at least I know it works, and smoke detectors can be fun. I hope the heck I didn't scare you away there. But anyway, yeah, I rarely have this happen, and but I wanted to still do the show tonight, and so I decided to still do it. So you're kind of getting to see, someone being here and what that can be like. Haven't usually done that. But it is my hope to bring on someone or two, maybe even you, Kaylin. We'll bring you on the show sometime. And I also want to, put your ears out there. We are going to do a show with Orca. Me and my friend need to get to Orca and get through their process that I wasn't aware that I still needed to do because we did Orca for the TV show over there. I used to do a TV show. I didn't realize I had to go back through it. So, Orca, we're actually going to try to do an Orca show because my friend wants to have more viewership. So, I figure we'll do one over there, probably on a monthly basis. But I like doing one here. It's just a lot easier. So anyway, just a general reminder for folks who are going to be wanting to watch shows. I will be keeping this one up for a little while on. Well, no, what's going to happen? I'm sorry, let me put it this way. I'm going to transfer the show over to YouTube, and then what's going to happen is I'm going to put a link into the Hot Topics page so you can see it. Anyone who wants to see any other shows that I did, maybe like uh, I think I have 2 years worth of shows, and I'm slowly putting those up on YouTube. So I just want to let you know that that's what we're doing with that. Um, we're still going to do Facebook Live because it's just a lot easier to do the live here. Plus, I tend to have more of a fan base with that. Oh, shoot. I'm sorry, Caitlin. Oh, my God. I hope you're okay. Oh, shoot. Sorry about that. Oh, my goodness. Okay. So, yeah. So, that's what we're going to do with the, yeah, I don't like smoke detectors, but they save lives. Okay. We can laugh about it now, right? Okay. So, let's see what you have to say. Oh, yeah? Yeah. Oh, wow. Wow, I can't imagine that. Yeah. I mean, these things are loud. Um, yeah, smoke detectors can be very loud. And I always thought I went, deaf a couple times. Um, but I can't really take them offline here. I'd be in big trouble if I did that. And plus, I can't even reach them to do that. So, which I suppose is a good thing. But smoke detectors, yeah, yeah. What a way to. I do apologize about that. Um, yeah. So, and plus these ones pick up steam and think it's smoke. It's crazy. Um, okay, so some other things I wanted to kind of jump into just really quickly. I'm not really getting into politics tonight, although I tell you, if I did, oh my goodness, it would be really fun. Um, Goodness gracious. Yeah. I'm not gonna do that tonight because I am just, guess I've got a quiet rage going on with things going on, particularly out in Minneapolis right now. I think I've had it up to here, but that's all I'm gonna say to it. I think there's just a lot going on, and I just gotta ride the wave. Um, you know, Definitely don't do it on autopilot. Um, get involved, speak up, do what you gotta do, speak up. It's important. I know this is not, and let me just paraphrase this. For many people tell me, "Oh, I don't get into politics." Okay, well, this isn't politics. This is this is America right now. Okay, it's not politics. It's you live in America right now. So it's more than politics. It's if you tell me again that you don't get involved in politics, I'm going to tell you this isn't politics. Um, and I mean, just said I wouldn't get into politics, but what I'm not going to get into is an argument tonight with people. I've seen what people tell me about their version of what's going on, and it's just very frustrating because, respectfully, I don't agree with them, and a bunch of us don't agree with you. Okay? It's just the way it's going to have to be to agree to disagree, and in some cases move on. Because people, have had it up to here in reality. But what I will say is I made my points clear today. I rarely go on there and spew, but today I did say what makes this different. The counter argument, and I'm not going to get into the specifics, but let's get into the reality of this just for a minute. Something has to change. The courts or Congress have to intervene because this is too much. And I've already seen the comparisons and arguments around law enforcement and the arguments. My best argument, the argument's going to be that Americans get killed every day in law enforcement situations. But this is what makes this one different. 2 Americans in a matter of weeks by federal agents. Okay? I want you to just understand that. And I want you to understand that the investigative process is not what it should be. But if you don't take my word for it, you can research it. I've already seen them say, well, 67 people died under Obama. Okay, fair enough. I would love to see the data to that. You're relying on a meme, and you know what, I do think that's a comparison which I would love to talk about, like how many Americans, though, were killed by federal agents under other presidents. Okay? And that's what I'm talking about. We're not talking about an argument. I'm not looking to argue with you. I'm not looking to argue about your politics. I'm looking for you to look at it. Like I'm looking at what you argued, which you're saying is 67 people died under Obama, whatever the number was. You know what? So let's go have a look at that data. And okay, fine. But this is different, and it's a feeling I have. Okay? And I go with feelings that I have. And what can I do about it? Not much. What can you do about it? Not much. You can speak up. You can voice your displeasure. But that's, the people in power have something they can do about it. They can do something, and we're about to see what they're going to do. And I can tell you what I think is going to happen. And, based on what I've read, what you've probably seen, the Democrats are going to withhold funding. They're going to force that issue again with this government shutdown deadline. And because there's no other way right now. No one is listening. Remember how I talked about this? Just a few minutes ago, we talked about this whole thing about that. And, shit. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry, Caitlin. Yeah. So I think what is really telling tonight, and I wasn't really going to get into it, but I think it just is interesting because I would really like to look at the data. Okay? But I also think it's time to turn that heat down out in Minneapolis. I think that the heat's too much. And you're going to tell me, well, that's the way it is. It's the way it is. Okay. It's the way it is. And that's the way you want to deal with it. But 2 Americans in a matter of weeks. And by federal agents. You're not able to justify anymore around the ICE routine. ICE will claim interference. But 2 Americans, can we take care when we're going about this? And the answer is no, because everyone has been, conditioned to believe they can do whatever they want. And this isn't what this country was supposed to be about. And that's really what is frustrating. And you can argue, that's fine. At the end of the day, we're going to see where history lands. And that's all we can do. And I never knew that Minneapolis was going to be a flashpoint. Although I got thinking about it, and this isn't the first time America has been through this. So maybe look back in history a little bit around riots, different riots. And this is where folks are arguing Americans have been killed by law enforcement. But have they been in this way? And that is the question. It's not just, it's not an easy answer because everyone has a different version. And I'm talking to you about my version tonight. We call this worldview. So my worldview is that something has to change. And the way it's going to happen, in a sense, is, through ways that we may not like the issue of Congress, like the Democrats, possibly a good chance of them holding up funding, blocking funding through this deadline. And that's not where we want to go. Turn the heat down in Minneapolis a little bit, for goodness sake. It isn't just about Minneapolis, it's about the country. And any chance, I don't want to go into a deep water tonight, but let's see what we got going in on the comments here. Yeah, I definitely want to. You know what I'm going to do in the next week? I am going to look at the data. And I am going to bring the data, if I can find it. I will bring the data onto this show. You have my word. For the other side, who's telling me that 67 people under Obama were killed. And there were no riots. Okay. You know what? That's a challenge. You just gave me a challenge. And I will find the data, and we will bring it on the show. Why not? Try to talk about, on top of Columbia. But, the reality is maybe there is a need to kind of put this to bed, in a sense. And there's no real putting it to bed. I'm sorry. But there's no way. What else do we need to look at, Caitlin? And hopefully, we don't have any smoke detector issues next week. So, Caitlin, you're saying we need to look at the data. Oh, we'll look at something else. So what we're going to do is we are going to do that. I think I will make it my mission to look at that and kind of look at that data. If we can kind of look at it. I'm just curious how many in this way had it happen. And we're going to go from there. And I mean, I like to try to be fair. Let's see. I heard that. So let's see what else is going on in the comments. It's kind of a long show tonight. But it's okay, because we're all getting snowed in tonight. I heard that they are putting, let me see what time it is. Yeah, I need to actually get off this thing. So, we will get done with the show in a minute. I heard that they are putting all of their force to Minneapolis because they have to win in Minneapolis. IRL lose. If they force to Minneapolis, they don't have. Yeah, it doesn't, I guess to me, it doesn't really matter why they're doing Minneapolis, but they need to turn that heat down. And someone else told me, well, if they do that, then if they do that, it's not going to harm anything. Turn the heat down, pull your people back, get them figured out, and then go back out in the field and do the job. Okay, folks, I have to actually get off. I didn't realize it was getting to be this late. So we're going to do that, and I will get back with y'all next week. Look forward to that. We're going to try to look into that data for you. Just because I'm curious. And I want to be fair to this meme, which is, well, 67 people, were killed under Obama, and there was no riots. I think there's a different dynamic here. And different dynamic, that's my feeling. And you can yell at me and tell me about Obama all you want. It has nothing to do with who the president. The reality is, look, if this happened under any other, there would be heck to pay. So, anyway, just want to close out tonight with some brief news. Schools have already been closed, and check your channels. I can tell you, folks, at U32, and I do believe Montpelier, in those districts, those have been closed. And you'll want to check other districts to make sure, but I can almost make the call for you, but I have to be careful, I guess. I'm not WDEB up here in Waterbury, so, the old-fashioned, way of getting school closures when we were kids was via radio. But I have solid information, which I posted on Hot Topics Facebook page, that U32 district will be closed tomorrow. And the superintendent over there wishes everybody a warm, safe day over there. Okay, and be sure to check for closures and delays tomorrow. And I know I have some friends who have things they're doing. Make sure to make that call in the morning or text to see if you need to go out, because you may not have to. Also, pay close attention to the bus schedules. And also, CVMC, or Central Vermont Medical Center, is going to have delayed openings on their medical properties. The ER and regular and other hospital stuff should be available, but there might be some delays on the medical properties. Definitely a delayed opening, I believe. So check that out. If it's in your area, check the same thing. Check your buses too before going out, because you might be in for a surprise. We're supposed to get a significant amount of snow in this area. Some areas can anticipate 12 to 18 inches, if not more. So this one's going to be a big one, folks. We should see some warming up, though. As precipitation comes, you do get warm-ups. We're coming out of a frigid weekend. Just amazing how cold it got. Seeing colder, believe it or not. And I did want to thank the folks who came together and continue to do that work, and I am kind of doing it myself tonight, that we were able to get the shelters in place. Folks were able to have warming shelters during the day during this cold weather snap. So I just want to thank those folks. And anyway, we will come back next week. I don't know if maybe I'll do one earlier to talk about Columbia, or if I'll wait till next Sunday to do it. Either way, I will see y'all next week, and thank you for tuning in through the rockiness of that smoke detector. I do apologize for the issue may have caused some of our guests here tonight. But I will talk with y'all next week. please be safe out there. And if you know somebody who needs housing, please have them contact 211. And during the day, you can also, 211 and connect in with economic services. There has been a relaxation of the hotels around the room restrictions, so look for that. But it's only through this cold snap. So just so you're aware of that. So be safe, everybody. To the kids out there, enjoy your snow day tomorrow. And if your school is brave enough to have school tomorrow, well, there you go. Okay, everyone. Have a wonderful night, and thanks for coming by and experiencing raw live show. This isn't, this is live. This is not an edited thing. All right. I'm Zach Hughes, and guess what time it is? I am out of here. Thanks.